Hi everyone, I'm Kira Sanbonmatsu. Thanks for joining us. We're going to be talking about our new COP report, and we're just going to invite our guest here to join us. We're going to be joined by Lieutenant Governor Kim Guadagno. For tuning in.
Can you hear me?
Yes, good
There you
afternoon.
go.
Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. It's going to be an interesting conversation.
Great, great. So, of course, we're here. I'm Kira Sanbonmatsu, Senior Scholar at the Center for American Women in Politics, joined by Lieutenant Governor Guadagno, former Lieutenant Governor of New Jersey. Probably needs no introduction, but of course, she served 2 terms as our first Lieutenant Governor. She was also Secretary of State. She was the Republican nominee for governor in 2017, and recently was leading the food bank in Monmouth County, and Ocean County is currently a partner at the law firm Connell Foley. And we can't forget the first woman sheriff from Monmouth County. So thanks so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you. I think most of the fun stories will be from the sheriff's race.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Good to know. Excellent. Excellent. So we're here to talk about the report I had an opportunity to co-author with my colleague at COP, Dr. Claire Gothrow. And the report called Money Matters in the 50 States is on our website. And we're really excited to share the results with everyone. This is a collaboration with OpenSecrets. And what we do in the report is look at 2 decades of statewide contributions, looking at who is giving and who is receiving money in terms of donor gender and candidate gender to statewide executive candidates. And before we dive into the report, though, I was curious because you have held statewide office and we just aren't seeing enough women in those positions. Women are only about 31% in our data, and that's a historic high, but that number has not moved a lot. In general, what do you see as the reason that women are underrepresented and women of color particularly underrepresented in those offices?
Well, I think the short answer has to be a hot topic in the courts these days, and that is who is making the pick. In New Jersey, anyway, and this is what you have to learn if you're going to run for office, the population doesn't get to make the pick. The party bosses get to make the pick. And that is where their own prejudices, and I don't mean that in a bad way, come forward. But people are comfortable with people that look like them. And if the party boss is a white male, just to pick a wild example in New Jersey, then they're more likely to pick a white male to represent them down the line. And that once a party boss picks you, it's almost game over in New Jersey anyway. So I think that's a huge barrier. I think money, of course, which we'll get to in a minute, but I also think for a woman, it's childcare. When I first ran for office as the sheriff, somebody actually asked me in the screening process to get to these party bosses, right? In the screening process, who was going to take care of my 3 kids while I was the sheriff in Monmouth County? And I thought to myself, before the women in the room crawled over the table and tried to choke the poor guy, would you ask that question of a man? And of course you wouldn't. Men are expected to have reliable childcare in some way or another. So I do believe childcare is a huge factor in the decision to get in the game. And of course, it's a blood sport, so you got to have thick skin.
And you were able to make that work even if voters weren't sure about your
Well,
kids. You figured it out.
Well, you have to figure it out or you don't get in the game. I was very lucky. I had a very supportive husband, very supportive kids. They were a little older. We've always had a 2-income family. We've always worked. So we've always had to figure it out, whether it's running for office or going to work every day. So I have very, very supportive husband, or partner in many cases. So I was lucky. But I do believe that's also a factor in the ability of women to get elected generally. For a man in a political scenario like that to ask a question of me, I didn't ask that of any of the other people trying to become the sheriff, is really gives you some idea of the barriers. And it wasn't that long ago. It was 2007 So it wasn't, it wasn't like 30 years ago for me. It was 10 years ago for us. So
Right.
yeah, a huge barrier.
Great. And so our report, Money Matters, as well as we put out a report in December about governors specifically, this report faces on statewide executives. I mean, another question that comes up when you're thinking about running and when you're running money. So I'm curious, one of the things that we find is that women are less likely than men to finance their own campaigns, to contribute to their own campaigns. And we also find that women are more likely to raise more of their money from small contributions. And both of these aspects of raising money can make it harder for women. And so I'm curious, what are your thoughts about how the playing field might be leveled for women with respect to fundraising for statewide office?
Right. I think women have to learn how to make the ask. It's easy for me to ask for money for you. It really is. Mm-hmm. I would much rather ask for money. I worked at the food bank. I would much rather ask for money for a hungry child than to ask for money for me. And when I do ask for money for me to run for political office, I have a natural inclination to say, and in exchange for which I will give you this. But in politics, one, you can't say that, it's illegal. It'll get you thrown in jail. But second, yeah, you can't make a promise that you are unlikely to keep. So women need to learn how to make the ask. They need to get used to making the ask, understanding that they are probably the best candidate for whatever office they're running for. And they don't apologize for it. I think that's the big hurdle when it comes to running for statewide office. Self-funding, I didn't have the luxury. I did learn, I'm W-2 income, have been forever. And so I never had the luxury of writing a check bigger than maybe $10,000, but women also have to start getting in the room with the money. And, how many times have we all walked in a room and sitting around the table or people, twice our age and white males. You need to get to know those people. You need to get to be friends of those people because they are the money people. And that's a part of the challenge. It's a part of the game, if you will. Because without the money, especially in New Jersey, where you're in the middle of two really expensive media markets, you won't be able, there's only one statewide office. I ran on the ticket with the governor. He picked me. So, but the second time around, if I did not have, when I ran, not the second time around, when I ran for governor, if I didn't have matching funds, I wouldn't, I wasn't successful as it was, but I would never have gotten past the primary without matching funds.
So some states do have matching funds, like New Jersey for the governor's race. So that was important. That's really interesting. And so money matters in state offices, it sounds like.
I don't think you can get statewide office. Well, like I said, we only have really the governor's race here, but statewide office, you cannot win without money. If the money differential is extreme, as I think it was in my gubernatorial race, it wasn't just the money that was the issue, but it was a huge factor. If I'm spending half my day sitting literally in my kitchen making phone calls to potential donors, then that's a half a day I'm not out shaking hands and meeting voters. So it really makes a big impact.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is some good news in our report, so I want to make sure that gets out to the public as well, because we've crunched all the numbers, and we do have some encouraging news for women who want to seek statewide office, which is, when you average across races, in similar types of races, where there is or isn't an incumbent seeking reelection, on average, women are able to get there. They are able to raise, on average, similar amounts. That's the women who enter. We don't know how many women didn't run because they didn't have enough financial backing to even get in the race. But I'm wondering, what would you tell women who are thinking about running statewide to encourage them? What words of advice would you have for them?
I always tell people that policy reflects the people sitting around the table. So if women don't run, simple fundamental questions like childcare are never going to be asked. They just don't get asked that often. So women have to run so that we're all represented. So things do change. So things get better. So policy begins to reflect the demographic of, in our case, New Jersey. I mean, there's more women registered to vote in New Jersey than there are men yet. Look at the numbers. So women should get in the game. They shouldn't be afraid to get in the game. I'll loan them my bulletproof vest from being the sheriff they want. You have to be ready to take a few punches, but you have to be ready to give a few punches. Is a lot of women don't have, a lot of people don't have the taste for that. I know my husband didn't. He didn't like it when I was attacked. And, you know, it's a part of the process. So I think they need to get in the game. They need to stay in the game. And while they're moving up the political chain, start taking notes. Keep track of every single person you've met. Keep track of every single email you've ever gotten. And because when you do run for office on a statewide basis, you're going to go back and tap it. And you're going to say, remember when we met, whatever. You need someone, you need to be very, very much in touch with the people that you're working with now and as you move up the ladder. And you need to reach back out to them and not be embarrassed to reach back out to them. I know, you know, high school is not unheard of right now. Keep track of it. And it's so much easier now to keep track of people that you've been in touch with. You'd be amazed that party really doesn't make a difference when you go back to friends from high school and college. They don't care. They're just supporters. I believe I had a lot of supporters who were women supporters who were from the other party when I ran on a statewide basis. But you keep track of them and start now. I don't care how old your listeners are right now.
Yeah, I like to tell my students at Rutgers about this issue to kind of get them thinking about it from a young age. And it sounds like one of the pieces of advice is to build that network and maintain it.
Yep. Yeah. And then don't be afraid to go back and tag it. I mean, literally say, I'm running for office. I'm running for office for these 3 reasons or whatever. Remember when we did this, I need your support now, and support financially, because without the money, really not going to get the word out.
Right. It's so critical. Yeah, great. And so in our report, we also talk about women giving and that they're underrepresented as donors. So, so let's shift to the donor side of things. So we know that men are more likely to give to governor's races, attorney general races, secretary of state races than women. Do you have any thoughts on why that is, on why men are more likely than women to give to politics?
I think they're used to it. I think women, I believe it as, you know, I know we've had the right to vote for 100 years or more, 102 years now, I think, but we haven't exercised our right to hold public office. So we're not used to giving. And I think you have to get used to giving. And I refuse to accept the idea that, you know, I have to go to my husband and ask permission to do that. Although I suspect some of that is there. I'd love to see you go a little deeper into that to see if they're just reporting their husband so that they don't get calls later as the donor. It's possible. It was shocking. That part of your report was disappointing because I thought after Hillary Clinton ran and the vice president won, that we would see more activism. And I hope that we still have that shot, because women should donate, because that's the only way to get a seat at the table for one woman.
Yeah, it's we do want that message to get out to everyone. And one of the things, as you probably noticed in the report, is that women are better represented as donors to Democratic candidates than Republican candidates. So I'm curious about particularly getting Republican women more involved in giving, if you had any thoughts about how we might go about that.
Well, you know, I think your study's a snapshot in time. I'd love to go back and see the only female governor in New Jersey happened to be a Republican woman. I'd love to see what her numbers were, you know, adjusting for time, just to see if we're not in a phase versus a problem. You know what I mean? So women just have to get used to writing a check, and it has to be a big check if they have the wherewithal to do it. If not, we are not going to be able, I don't think, to equalize the donor base. And in which case, public officials, people that want to run for office, better get used to asking, women anyway, better get used to asking that man and making a pitch that the man is going to be responsive to. So that one I think is probably going to swing over time, I hope.
Mm-hmm. So is there anything you'd add that we haven't covered? We've talked about candidates, some of your experiences on the trail, the donor piece. Is there anything we haven't touched on?
Yeah, I think what people, if especially if the people that are listening are women, I think they need to understand that people are going to come in with preconceived ideas. It happened all the time with me when I ran for sheriff. I know that was a countywide office, but people told me I couldn't be sheriff because I didn't look like the sheriff. And so don't wear pink. All the handlers said, don't wear pink while you're running for office. And of course, that just made me mad and made me wear pink more often. But I mean, I really do believe, don't let anybody tell you you can't do something simply because you're a woman. It's self-defining, and you don't want to do that. If you are passionate about an issue, in my case, it started with my kids. If you're passionate about an issue, get in the game. And then if you like it and you can take the blood sport part of it, stay in the game, because we owe it to the next generation to be sure that we're I like to Anna Quinlan's line, reach as you rise. We owe it to them to bring them with us as we move up in the public realm. And we're doing a little better in Congress than we are in governors, but that'll change, I hope.
Absolutely. So those are really inspiring words, and certainly there's so many firsts yet to achieve at that statewide level. There are only 8 women serving as governors of the 50 states right now. So certainly we can do better than that, I think, as a nation. So thanks so much for joining us and for sharing your thoughts and these inspiring words.
Well, and thank you for everything that you're doing to bring all these issues to the forefront, because I think that's the only way. Push, push, push. That's the only way to get it done.
We're trying.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Take care.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone for joining.